As we begin, I'd like to share Boise State's land acknowledgement that will momentarily be popping up on your screen. And I'd also like to recognize that this statement is not yet 1 year old. It was used initially at graduation last May, but it's been the product of many conversations and tremendous efforts to do more to recognize and respect our Indigenous partners, and also to support our Native American students more directly. So the statement was developed as part of a committee with many voices, both on campus and beyond. And one important outcome of this process has been the establishment of a tribal scholarship that covers tuition for enrolled members of any of Idaho's 5 tribes. 5 federally recognized tribes. And this has allowed us to increase enrollment of the 5 tribes on campus more than 5-fold in 2 years. So please share this opportunity if you know eligible students or people that would like to come back to school and take advantage of that. So many of you in this room know that the Andrus Center has been convening public dialogue on this campus since 1994. And we've covered topics from salmon and bull trout to invasive weeds and recreation. Our environmental conferences are usually full of working professionals, and quite frequently these conversations are supported by our partners in the federal government, or our keynotes are delivered on topics about recent progress made by federal agencies in particular areas. But this year looks different. And this year is different. There's major changes afoot, indicating the tremendous uncertainty and unprecedented changes in the way public lands are managed and the way they're valued. And it's important now more than ever to elevate moderating voices and to recount histories of hard work and recognize those of us and our predecessors that have come together for critical and civil dialogue to move things forward. So while we recognize that today the room looks a little bit different, and because of that, the future might look different, we're here in part to honor the collaborations of the past and to imagine what they will mean for our collective future. So we thank you again for participating, because that's the first step. And your participation in many ways helps move this dialogue forward. So we thank you for the participation at the film festival last night. We thank the virtual viewers and those of you in the room. We are grateful to our sponsors that make this possible. We're grateful to our donors, both that purchase tables and that sponsor the conference. We are grateful to a donor that made virtual attendance by U.S. Forest Service employees possible. We're grateful to Elaine French, who bought a table so that Idaho Conservation League and the Conservation Voters of Idaho could join us here. And we're grateful for the networking and the dialogue that you'll have at your tables today. But we're gathered here to reflect and celebrate the effort and the expertise that led to the creation and subsequent management of the Hells Canyon Recreation Area nearly 50 years ago, on the last day of December in 1975. And this is not a single, clear, easy to tell story. There's not one hero, but instead it's been the work of many hands and many compromises along the way. So more than anything, you'll hear today about challenges and opportunities. You'll hear about tensions and sometimes the resolution, or at least the management of those tensions. But more than anything, you'll hear about people who appreciate and adore the place called Hells Canyon and the ways it represents the best of our state and our region. And now more than ever, stories of compromise for the greater good need to be remembered and retold. So you'll hear a lot from the men and women who were involved. And I'd like to say a few quick things about Cecil D. Andrus's role and philosophy in creating the NRA, because our center carries his legacy forward. And it's well known that Andrus's election as governor of Idaho in 1970 had conservation issues as a centerpiece, that they were important to him. And the protection of the white clouds gets a lot of attention in that campaign. But he also opposed more dams in Hell's Canyon as part of that same campaign. And the senators in Idaho, Fred Church and Len Jordan, were working together on a moratorium around new dams proposed to last 8 years. And the governor's support of that moratorium added momentum to that movement. And Andrus also worked with McClure to help define the boundaries of the NRA in the early 1970s. So Andrus was practical in his approach, and he stayed focused on the river. He wrote to McClure in a letter dated June 13th, 1974, about being practical and supporting the bill to focus on the canyon, the Seven Devils, and the Rapid River, and avoiding too large of a land designation where there was opposition beyond that. By the 1990s, when Andrus came back as governor, his second life as governor, he was also involved in supporting a compromise to allow for time periods on the river where people could float the upper part in Hell's Canyon without power boats, and to mitigate that conflict. There was a lot of contention over that issue, and ultimately the Forest Service came up with a formula that sets aside some quiet days on the river. So you'll see around the room, each of the tables have a centerpiece with some documents pulled from this 50-year history. We also have the special collections from the McClure Center and the Albertsons Library that are set up for you to look around. And we had an enormous amount of joy reading through these documents and thinking about all of the individual decisions that happened, the letters from the constituents, from Boy Scouts and students that contributed to the momentum of this place. But the idea to have the conference about Hell's Canyon emerged out of dialogue across the board members around the Andrus Center's annual environmental conference. And this was intentionally a chance to reflect on the way Idaho politicians came together to protect a special place. So it seemed only natural to invite our friends and colleagues at the McClure Center, given the key roles that Andrus and McClure played in creating the NRA and supporting it. So this allowed us to put the power of two universities and two public-facing centers together. So I'd like to introduce my co-MC for this event, Dr. Katherine Himes, who is the director of the James A. and Louise McClure Center for Public Policy Research at the University of Idaho. Katherine has been an absolutely amazing partner in this joint conference, as have her incredible staff, and she is a wonderful asset to the McClure Center and the state of Idaho as a whole. Welcome, Katherine.
Thank you so much, Emily. The McClure Center is thrilled to have been invited to partner with the Andrus Center. As Emily stated, today you will hear a lot about the men and women involved. I want to say a few things about Jim McClure's role and philosophy in creating the National Recreation Area, because our center carries his and Louise McClure's legacy forward. I'm going to get emotional, which is really not my style, but the opportunity to do this is really special for me. I had the privilege of reading many original materials in McClure's congressional files at the University of Idaho Special Collections in Moscow, and I did this in the fall. It was just me in this room, and I read official letters, draft committee and floor remarks, constituent letters and his responses, and newspaper articles. I had boxes and I had carts lined up for me to sift through. And I also had the privilege of speaking with several former staff. Constituent input was paramount. In 1971, as a U.S. representative, Jim McClure polled his constituents in Idaho's 1st Congressional District, asking whether they supported dams, a wild and scenic snake, a recreation area, and wilderness designation, and whether they were concerned about impacts to timber and water use. In 1974, as a U.S. Senator, McClure used the same questions to learn how opinions might have changed. He shared a comparison of both responses with lawmakers in Washington as a way to bring Idaho's changing needs and voices to the decision-making process. When congressional hearings were scheduled, McClure insisted that hearings be held in Lewiston, Idaho, and La Grande, Oregon, in addition to those in DC, so residents could speak directly to lawmakers and share their perspectives on a proposed national recreation area. President Ford signed into law the National Recreation Area Act on December 31st, 1975, as Emily mentioned. And the act protected over 650,000 acres in western Idaho and northeast Oregon, It designated over 60 miles of the Snake River below Hell Canyon Dam as wild or scenic under the National Wild and Scenic River System. It designated over 26 miles of the Rapid River as wild and preserved over 210,000 acres of land as wilderness. Management was assigned to the Forest Service. The act reflected the desire to keep federal lands in multiple use: cultural preservation, existing mineral claims, grazing, recreation, timber harvesting, and water use are part of the NRA. Getting to the NRA, as Emily mentioned, took years and multiple sessions of Congress. Some proposals never left committee. Today, the NRA continues to be managed for multiple use, spanning motorized and non-motorized recreation, timber harvesting, grazing, mining, cultural preservation, conservation, and beneficial use of water, consumptive and non-consumptive, including power generation. We have a wonderful program lined up for you. We have 3 full panels, preceded by a keynote and lunch and a film.